Hey guys, tonight we are going to gently dismantle pretty much every romantic idea you've ever had about the Vikings. Forget the glorious horned helmets which they didn't wear. By the way, the pristine fjords and the chiseled heroes from TV shows. We're going to dive into the gray, uncomfortable, and frankly, quite smelly reality of what it was actually like to live in the Viking Age. Spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't make it till lunchtime on your first day. This isn't about glorifying violence. It's about appreciating the sheer toughness it took to simply wake up in the morning. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into 2 nights' journey together. The first thing you notice isn't the cold, though it's a deep, biting cold that seems to seep in from the very earth beneath you. No, the first thing you notice is the smoke. It's a thick, acrid haze that stings your eyes and catches in the back of your throat, forcing a dry, raspy cough out of you. This is your alarm clock. There's no gentle sunlight filtering through a window, because there are no windows. You're in a building called a longhouse, and your first breath of the day is a cocktail of wood smoke, stale air, and something else. Something farm-like. You open your eyes, but it barely helps. The world is a murky gloom, lit only by the weak, sullen glow of a central fire pit several paces away. The fire is the heart of this home, its only source of light and warmth, but it's a temperamental, smoky heart. You can just make out the high, arched ceiling far above, but the beams are lost in a permanent, greasy cloud of soot. A single, small hole in the roof, called a LJ or E, is supposed to let the smoke out, but it's a spectacularly inefficient design. It's more of a suggestion than a chimney. You're lying on a raised wooden platform that runs along the wall. It's your bed, your bench, and your general living space. Your blanket is a coarse, scratchy wool, maybe a deer hide if you're lucky. It smells faintly of wood smoke, dampness, and you. There is no concept of privacy here. To your left and right, shrouded in shadows, are the sleeping forms of your entire extended family. Maybe 15, 20, even 30 people, all sharing this one long, cavernous room. You can hear the symphony of their sleep snores, ghosts, the occasional sleepy murmur. Then you hear a different sound. A low, wet snort, followed by the soft shuffle of a hoof on the packed dirt floor. You peer over the edge of your sleeping platform, down into the central aisle, and your eyes meet the placid, chewing face of a cow. Then there, a few feet away, a couple of sheep are huddled together. Yes, the livestock lives with you during the harsh Scandinavian winters. Bringing the animals inside was just common sense. It kept them from freezing to death, and their collective body heat added a few precious degrees to the ambient temperature. It also meant the floor, a simple carpet of hard packed earthen straw, was a shared toilet for man and beast. The smell you didn't quite place earlier. Now you know, use it up. The cold air hitting your bare skin. People didn't really wear pajamas. You likely slept in your linen under tunic or just nothing. The longhouse itself is an impressive structure, perhaps 60 or 70 feet long, built from timber and turf, with curved walls designed to withstand the fierce northern winds. But it is not a cozy home. It's a glorified, smoky, communal barn. Every surface feels slightly damp. Your worldly possessions are stored in a single wooden chest at the foot of your platform. This chest is your wardrobe, your chair, and when you eat, it will be your table. It's a surprisingly practical bit of minimalist furniture. This is the reality of your home. It's dark, it's crowded, and it's filled with smoke and animals. Historians and archaeologists are still debating just how these spaces were divided for different family units. Were there temporary cloth or wooden screens hung up for a sliver of privacy? Or did everyone truly live in one continuous, open-plan mess? The evidence is sparse, leaving us to imagine this life of radical, unavoidable community. There are no rooms to retreat to, no doors to close, Your entire existence is public. Every argument, every illness, every moment of tenderness is witnessed by the whole clan. You swing your legs off the platform, your bare feet meeting the shockingly cold, damp earth, and the Viking day has truly begun. Your first conscious thought, after the smoke in the cow, is a pressing, biological urge. The modern part of your brain screams, "Where is the bathroom?" You quickly discover the answer is everywhere and nowhere. There is no designated room, no private stall, no porcelain throne. The concept is utterly alien. An older woman, maybe your aunt or grandmother, sees the look on your face and just jerks her chin towards the heavy, hide-covered doorway. The message is clear. Outside, you grab your tunic, a simple, T-shaped garment of rough wool, and pull it on. It does little to ward off the chill as you push aside the thick animal skin serving as a door and step out into the pale gray dawn. The cold is a physical shock. The air is clean, at least a welcome relief from the longhouse effigy, but it's so cold it feels like tiny needles on your skin. You see a few other figures from your household dotted around the clearing, attending to the same business. Privacy is a luxury you don't have. You find a spot behind a scraggly bush at the edge of the woods, where the ground is already frozen solid. For toilet paper, you have a handful of dried moss you grabbed from the base of a tree, or perhaps some broadleaves if the season is right. It's functional, but not exactly comfortable. Back inside, you feel the need to wash your hands. Near the fire, there's a large, shallow wooden bowl filled with murky, icy water. This is the communal sink. Everyone dips their hands and face into the same water, which is probably fetched from a nearby stream or well each morning. You splash the frigid water on your face, the shock waking you up more effectively than any caffeine ever could. And here, in this moment of profound discomfort and questionable hygiene, you discover one of the great paradoxes of the Viking Age. Because while your living conditions are, to put it mildly, squalid, you are expected to be impeccably groomed. Tucked into your belt pouch or hanging from a cord is your personal grooming kit. You pull it out. It's a set of tools, often made from bone or bronze. There's a pair of small, surprisingly delicate tweezers for plucking stray hairs. There's a tiny, scoop-like implement that archaeologists call an ear spoon. And most importantly, there's a comb. Vikings were obsessed with their combs. Archaeologists find them everywhere. They were sturdy, often beautifully carved from bone or antler, and they were an unnegotiable part of daily life. A well-kept beard and neat hair were signs of a respectable person. You would spend a significant amount of time each morning combing out the tangles, perhaps braiding your hair or beard and weaving in small beads or rings. A messy, unkempt appearance suggested you were a thrall, a slave, or an outlaw, but the grooming went further. You would have also used a harsh, lye-based soap made from animal fat and wood ash. This stuff would strip every last bit of grease from your hair and skin, and it had an interesting side effect. The high pH of the lye would often bleach hair, turning it a lighter, blondish color. This became a desirable fashion statement, to the point that dark-haired Vikings were known to intentionally use more of this harsh soap to lighten their locks. This obsession with grooming creates a fascinating historical debate. When Arab travelers like Ibn Fadl encountered Vikings on the Volga River, he described them as the filthiest of God's creatures, noting that they shared a single bowl of water to wash their faces and blow their noses in each morning, a scene you've just witnessed. Yet, in England, Christian monks complained that the Vikings were a menace because they were too clean. They wrote disapprovingly of how these Norsemen would comb their hair daily, bathe weekly on Saturdays, and change their clothes regularly, which gave them an unfair advantage in seducing English women. So which is it? Were they filthy or clean? The answer, as with most things in history, is it's a matter of perspective. Compared to the Islamic world's standards of ritual purity, they weren't sanitary. Compared to the Anglo-Saxons, who bathed maybe a few times a year, they were practically dandies. The Old Norse word for Saturday, laugardagiuar, literally means washing day. Despite the weekly bath and the daily combing, one thing is inescapable. Parasites. The close quarters you share with animals and other people are a perfect breeding ground for fleas and lice. The combs were good at removing them, but it was a constant, losing battle. Archaeologists examining the preserved contents of Viking cesspits in places like York have found overwhelming evidence of intestinal parasites, like roundworm and whipworm, meaning almost everyone was infected. So as you stand there, shivering, running a fine-toothed comb through your freshly bleached hair, you can't escape the persistent, low-grade itch on your scalp and the quiet turmoil in your gut. You are clean, by the standards of your time, but you are far from healthy. Then now, your stomach crumbles. It's time for breakfast. The word breakfast conjures images of variety and choice. In your world, it means one thing, porridge. Or, more accurately, puer, quappy substance that defies easy categorization. You make your way back to the central fire, where a large iron cauldron hangs from a hook over the embers. This cauldron is almost never empty and rarely scrubbed clean. It's the perpetual stewpot of the longhouse, the matriarch of the household. A formidable woman with keys dangling from her belt is ladling the morning's meal in two simple wooden bowls. She hands one to you. You look down at the contents. It's a thick, grayish gruel, made from whatever grains were available, usually barley or oats, sometimes rye. It's been simmered in water, or maybe milk if the cows are feeling generous. There are no sweeteners, no sugar, no honey for everyday use. Those are rare luxuries. Sometimes, for a bit of flavor, a handful of dried berries or chopped nuts might be thrown in, but not today. Today, it's just the unadorned, bland, life-sustaining sludge. You take your bowl and your wooden spoon, your only piece of personal cutlery, and find a spot on your chest to sit. The taste is earthy. It's warm, which is its primary virtue. It fills your stomach and gives you the energy you need for a day of hard labor. But it is profoundly, soul-crushingly monotonous. This, or some variation of it, is what you eat almost every single day. The Vikings had a name for it, grautir. It was the cornerstone of their diet. As you eat, you look around at what else is available. Hanging from the rafters, almost lost in the smoky gloom, are strips of dried fish, likely cod or haddock. Their silvery bodies twist in the heat drafts from the fire, looking like strange, mummified spirits. There are also braids of onions, perhaps some leathery-looking sausages. This is the pantry. Preservation was everything. During the short growing season, you deharvest what you could, but most of it had to be salted, smoked, dried, or fermented to last through the long, dark winter. Your diet is a direct reflection of your environment. In Scandinavia, where the soil is often poor and the growing season brutally short, you might cultivate small plots of cabbage, onions, and beans, but your main source of calories comes from hardy grains and your livestock. You have cows for milk, which you turn into butter and a sour, tangy cheese called skyr. You have sheep for wool and meat, and pigs that forage in the nearby woods. But fresh meat is a treat, usually reserved for feasts or festivals. For most of the year, your protein comes from that dried fish or from legumes. You might also get to eat bread, but not the soft, fluffy loaf you're used to. Viking bread was typically a dense, heady flatbread made from barley or rye flour, cooked on a hot stone or griddle over the fire. It was tough and chewy, more of a grain delivery vehicle than a pleasure to eat. This lack of variety leads to a constant, low-level malnutrition. Modern analysis of Viking skeletons reveals a lot about their health. Many show signs of iron deficiency anemia, likely from a diet lacking in fresh, red meat and green vegetables. Their teeth are another story. While they didn't have sugar, so cavities were less common than today. Their teeth were oft unworn down to stumps. This wasn't just from a tough diet. It was also from the stone ground flour. Tiny, abrasive particles from the grindstone would get mixed into the flour, acting like sandpaper on their enamel every time they ate bread or porridge. Dental abscesses were common and, without antibiotics, could be a fatal source of infection. One strange and so far unexplained bit of dental archaeology is that some male Viking skeletons, particularly those of merchants or warriors, have had horizontal grooves intentionally filed into their front teeth. Were these a form of intimidation, a tribal marking, or a way to show status? Academics are still fiercely debating the purpose of this bizarre and painful-looking body modification. You finish your bowl of grautier, scraping the last of it from the sides. There are no second helpings. Food is fuel, not pleasure. The men are starting to gather their tools. The women are planning their day of weaving, baking, and dairying. Your bland breakfast is over, but the hunger never truly goes away. It's a dull background home to your existence. The fear of a bad harvest, of a long winter, of the stores running out, is always there. This is what historians mean when they talk about a subsistence economy. You live on the edge, always one failed crop or one sick cow away from genuine starvation. And as you put your empty bowl down, you know that tonight's dinner will likely be more porridge, perhaps with some boiled cabbage and a small piece of dried fish thrown into the cauldron for a bit of excitement. The thought is not a comforting one. Now that you've had your, let's call it a nutritious breakfast, it's time to figure out your place in the smoky, crowded world. You can't just wander off and become a blacksmith because you feel like it. Viking society was highly stratified, and your station in life was almost certainly decided the moment you were born. Look around the longhouse. Every single person in here fits into one of three distinct categories. And your entire life, your rights, your duties, your very worth is defined by which box you're in. The three tiers were the Jar, LS the aristocracy, the Carls the free people, and the Thralls the enslaved. Let's start at the bottom, because statistically, that's where you're most likely to be. Meet the Thralls. They are the ones who woke up before you to tend the fire, the ones who are already out in the cold mucking out the animal stalls. They are property. They have no rights, no voice in the community, and can be bought, sold, or killed at their owner's whim. Where did they come from? They are the spoils of war. The human loot from raids on places like England, Ireland, or the Slavic lands. They are also born into it. If your mother was a thrall, you are a thrall. Or, perhaps, you were once a free person who fell into such deep debt that you had to sell yourself into servitude. Their life is one of unceasing labor and casual brutality. They do the heaviest, dirtiest, most dangerous work. They are the human engines of the Viking economy. While their owners might not abuse them needlessly, a healthy thrall is a productive thrall. After all, their existence is entirely dependent on the temperament of their master. If you are a thrall, you don't worry about what job you'll do today. You'll be told what to do, and you'll do it until you're told to stop. Your greatest hope is to one day be granted your freedom, a process called manumission, but it's a rare and often expensive privilege. Now, let's move up a rung. You're probably a Carl. This is the broad middle class, the backbone of Viking society. You are a free person. You can own land, inherit property, speak at the local assembly, and bear arms. This is the class of the farmers, the merchants, the craftspeople, and the majority of the warriors who went on raids. Your life is still one of hard work, but the work is for yourself and your family. The farm you tend belongs to you. The boat you build is yours. The profits you make from a trading voyage are yours to keep after giving a share to your chieftain. Of course, as a Carl, your reputation, or dear mister, is everything. It's a combination of your honor, your accomplishments, and the respect you command in the community. You guard it fiercely. An insult to your honor can't be ignored. It has to be answered, either with a sharp-witted poetic comeback or, more often, with violence. This is the class that populates the saga's people, constantly worrying about their status, their alliances, and their blood feuds. Freedom for a Carl means the freedom to work yourself to the bone on your own terms, and the freedom to die defending your family's honor. Finally, at the very top, you have the Jar LS. This is the chieftain, the local aristocrat. He lives in the biggest longhouse, owns the most land, has the most thralls, and commands the loyalty of the Carls in his territory. His wealth is ostentatious. His clothes are finer, dyed in bright, expensive colors like red or blue. He drinks from imported glass or silver cups while you use a wooden bowl. His sword has a silver inlaid hilt. He is a warrior, but also a politician, a judge, and a religious leader. He is expected to be generous, hosting great feasts for his followers to ensure their loyalty. This generosity is a key part of his power. A chieftain who hoards his wealth won't be a chieftain for long. If you are a Jarl, your life is one of leadership and constant pressure. You have to lead raids to bring in wealth, negotiate alliances with other chieftains, and settle disputes among your own people. Your position is powerful but precarious. A string of failed raids or bad harvests could see your followers abandon you for a more successful leader. One of the most debated questions among historians is just how rigid this system was. Could a particularly successful Carl, a warrior who amassed great wealth from raiding, effectively become a Jarl? Or could a Jarl who lost all his wealth and followers be reduced to the status of a Carl? The sagas suggest there was some social mobility, but it was likely very difficult. For the most part, you were born into your station. Your name even reflected it. The names given to thralls were often blunt and descriptive, like Fuli stinky or Order I dry, while Carls had more standard Norse names, and Jarl thus often inherited names that signified their noble lineage. So, as you stand there, digesting your porridge, you need to understand who you are. Are you a thrall, preparing for a day of thankless servitude? A Carl, feeling the weight of your family as farm on your shoulders? Or a Jarl, plotting how to maintain your power? Your answer changes everything. Let's assume you're a Carl, a free farmer. It's the most common and arguably the most representative experience of the Viking Age. The Jarl is too busy with politics, and the thrall has no agency. But you, the Carl, you are the engine of this world. Your day is not your own to fill with hobbies and leisure. It is a relentless cycle of tasks dictated by the sun, the seasons, and the pressing needs of survival. You step out of the longhouse, the weak morning light spreading over your family's farmstead, or the YR. It's not a huge expanse of land, just enough to sustain your family. There's the longhouse itself, a few smaller outbuildings for storage or specific crafts, a fenced-in pasture for the animals, and the fields. The fields are your lifeblood and your burden. If it's spring, the work is backbreaking. You and your older sons, perhaps with a thrall if you're prosperous enough, are out in the fields from dawn till dusk. The plow you use is a simple, heavy wooden thing called an hard, maybe tipped with a little bit of iron if you can afford it. It doesn't turn the soil over like a modern plow. It just cuts a furrow. You guide the yard while two scrawny-looking oxen pull it. The work is slow, muddy, and exhausting. You're constantly shouting at the oxen, wrestling the plow to keep the furrow straight, and your shoulders and back ache with a deep, permanent burn. After plowing comes sowing, flinging handfuls of precious barley and oat seeds, praying to the god Freyr for a good harvest. If it's summer, the work changes but doesn't lessen. You have to constantly weed the crops by hand. You need to cut hay in the high meadows, the vital source of winter fodder for your animals. You'll spend days on end with a scythe, swinging it in a steady rhythm under the long northern sun. The hay is then raked, dried, and stacked in tall mounds that dot the landscape. You also have to maintain the fences that keep your precious livestock and wild animals out. There's always a fence to mend, and you might venture into the woods to hunt for deer or boar, a welcome addition of fresh meat, or to forage for berries and mushrooms. If it's autumn, it's a race against the coming cold. Harvest time, the whole family is in the fields, cutting the ripened grain with iron sickles. It's then threshed beaten to separate the grain from the stalk and winnow, where you toss it into the air, so the wind can carry away the lighter chaff. It's dusty, repetitive work. This is also the time for slaughtering. You can't afford to feed all your animals through the winter, so you choose the ones to be killed. Their meat will be smoked, salted, and stored, and every part of the animal is used. The blood for pudding, the intestines for sausage casings, the bones for tools and soup, the hide for leather. Nothing is wasted. And what if you're not a farmer, but a craftsman? Your work is just as demanding. If you're a blacksmith, you spend your day in a small, dark hut, facing the searing heat of the forge. Your world is the roar of the bellows, the clang of hammer on anvil, the hiss of hot metal in water. You are a vital member of the community, forging and repairing every essential iron tool. Knives, axes, plowshares, nails, cauldron hooks. It's powerful, almost magical work, but it's also dangerous. A single stray spark could blind you, and the constant smoke and heat take a toll on your lungs. Perhaps you're a woodworker. You sit outside the longhouse, a collection of axes, adzers, and knives around you. You are shaping a new handle for a tool, carving a bowl, or perhaps working on a section of a new boat. You understand the grain of the wood, how it splits, how it bends. Your hands are calloused and strong. Or maybe you're a leather worker, treating hides with foul-smelling tannins made from tree bark and stitching them into shoes, belts, and bags. This brings up a fascinating bit of trivia about Viking work. Their shoes, known as turned shoes, were simple leather slippers made inside out and then turned right side out, so the stitching was on the inside. They were functional but not very durable, meaning a shoemaker was always in business. Historians are still trying to figure out the precise methods for some of their more complex crafts, like how they created the incredibly fine wire for filigree jewelry, or the exact chemical composition of the glass beads they both made and traded for. It was a world of practical skill, passed down from parent to child. No matter your trade, the work is physical, manual, and constant. There are no weekends, no paid holidays. Your only breaks are the major seasonal festivals, like Yule in winter or the celebration of the first harvest. For the rest of the year, your life is defined by this endless to-do list. The concept of a job as separate from life doesn't exist. Your work is your life, and as the sun reaches its peak in the sky, you don't stop for a lunch break. You might chew on a piece of dried fish or a heel of hard bread while you continue to work. The sun is your clock, and you have to use every moment of daylight it gives you. Let's say one day, while you're out mending a fence, you notice that your neighbor's scrawny-looking cattle have broken through and trampled a portion of your precious barley field. This is not a small matter. This is your winter food supply. This is your family as survival. In your world, you don't call the police. You don't sue in a courtroom with bewigged judges. You take your grievance to the thing. The thing, or Ring in Old Norse, is the central pillar of your legal and political world. It's an open-air assembly where all the free people, the Carls and Jarl, of a given region gather to make laws, pass judgment, and resolve disputes. It is democracy in its rawest, most chaotic form. You, as a free Carl, have not only the right but the duty to attend. The local thing might be held monthly, on a sacred hill, or in a designated field marked by stones. Everyone gathers. It's a serious legal proceeding, but it's also a major social event. People trade goods, share news, arrange marriages, and catch up on gossip. But the main event is the law. You stand before the assembly and the lurhak, and you state your case. You point to your neighbor, who is standing there looking sheepish, and you describe the damage to your crops. You demand compensation. Now, your neighbor gets to respond. He might argue his fence was sound and your fence was weak. He might claim a wild animal spooked his cattle. Witnesses can be called. Oaths will be sworn on a sacred arm ring, oft undipped in the blood of a sacrificed animal, calling on the gods to witness the truth of their words. Lying under such an oath was a terrible crime, believed to bring the wrath of the gods down upon you and your kin. The outcome isn't decided by a single judge. It's decided by the assembly, guided by the local chieftain and the law speaker. The law speaker is a fascinating figure. He is a man respected for his wisdom and memory, who has memorized the entire legal code of the region. There are no written law books here. The law is a living tradition, held in the mind of this one person. He doesn't act as a judge, but as a legal consultant. He recites the relevant laws for your case, explaining the precedents and the established fines for cattle-trampled barley incidents. After hearing all the arguments and the relevant laws, the assembly reaches a consensus. The most common outcome is a fine. Your neighbor is ordered to pay you a certain amount in silver or goods, perhaps a few sheep, or a new tunic to compensate for your lost grain. This system was designed to prevent violence by providing a public forum to air grievances and receive a settlement, a thing aimed to stop disputes from escalating into a bloody feud. The sagas are filled with stories of things going right, then wrong. A clever turn of phrase could win you the case, while a clumsy speech could see you humiliated. But what if the crime were more serious? Say, a man was killed. His family would bring the case to the thing, not asking for prison. Prisons didn't really exist, but for a massive payment called WER Guild, or Mangold. Every person had a price, a value based on their social standing. AHRL's life was worth a fortune. A Carl's was worth a considerable sum, and a Thrall's was worth very little, payable to his owner. If the killer and his family could pay the WER Guild, the matter was settled. If they couldn't, or wouldn't, the family of the slain could be legally entitled to seek revenge. This is where you see the strange duality of Viking law. It could be remarkably sophisticated, with complex rules for inheritance, land ownership, and contracts, but it could also sanction violence. One of the most famous and debated legal options at the thing was the Holmganga, a legally sanctioned duel to the death. If two men had a dispute they held and settle, they could agree to a duel on a small island home or a marked-off piece of land. The rules were specific, concerning the size of the dueling area, the number of shields allowed, and who could strike first. The winner of the duel was, by definition, in the right. It was trial by combat, a way of letting the gods decide the verdict. Historians argue about how common this actually was. Was it a frequent occurrence, or rare, dramatic event that was simply overrepresented in the sagas because it made for a good story? As you walk home from the thing, with the promise of a few sheep to replace your barley, you feel the system has worked. Justice, in a way, has been served. But you also saw two other families at the assembly, glaring at each other with murderous intent overall, and dispute that the thing failed to resolve. You know that this formal legal process is just one thin layer on top of a much older, much more dangerous system of purse in a honor and family vengeance. And that is a world you can be dragged into at any moment. The thing has settled your dispute with your neighbor, and you are satisfied. But a few weeks later, a cousin of yours, a hearth youth from a nearby farm, gets into a drunken brawl at a feast and kills a man from another clan. Suddenly, a cousin of yours, a hearth youth from a nearby farm, gets into a drunken brawl at a feast and kills a man from another clan. Suddenly, the abstract, legal principles of the thing feel very distant. Your family is now entangled in a blood feud, and that changes everything. The concept of a blood feud, or vendetta, is one of the most terrifying, undefining aspects of your social landscape. It operates on a simple, brutal principle: an eye for an eye. Your family, your clan, your TT, is your primary identity. An injury or insult to one member is an injury and insult to all, and the honor of the clan demands that it be avenged. The WER Guild payment was designed to prevent this, to substitute money for blood, but it didn't always work. Sometimes the offense was too great, the insult too deep, or one family was simply too proud or too poor to pay. Now that your cousin has killed someone, the victim's family has a right to seek revenge, not just against your cousin, the killer, but against any suitable male member of your clan. That includes you. Your life, through no fault of your own, is now in danger. You find yourself looking over your shoulder when you work in the fields. You carry your axe with you everywhere, not just as a tool, but as a weapon. The woods at the edge of your property, once a source of firewood and game, now feel menacing. A perfect place for an ambush. This isn't always chaos. It has its own unwritten rules. The revenge should be, in theory, proportional. A life for a life. But these things had a way of spiraling. The other family might ambush and kill your uncle as he travels to the market. Now your family is honor-bound to avenge him. So you and your brothers might gather at night and set fire to the longhouse of the rival clan. The truly horrific act known as house burning, which was condemned but certainly happened. In the sagas, it's the ultimate escalation. Now they have lost not one, but several family members in the blaze. Their obligation for revenge is even greater. A single death can trigger a chain reaction of retaliatory killings that can last for generations, decimating both families in the process. This is the dark side of the intense loyalty you feel to your kin. Your family is your safety net, your support system, your entire social world. But it's also a liability. You are responsible for their actions, and they are responsible for yours. If your hot-headed cousin commits a crime, you share in the guilt and the consequences. Life inside a feud is a state of constant, low-grade paranoia. Every stranger you see is a potential threat. Every trip away from your farm is a calculated risk. Alliances become critical. Your clan will call on its allies' families connected by marriage or oath for support, both in legal cases at the thing and in the actual fighting. The rival clan will do the same. The conflict can widen, pulling whole communities into its violent orbit. One of the curious historical debates revolves around how much of the sagas, which are our primary source for blood feuds, is historical fact versus literary drama. The Icelandic sagas, written hundreds of years after the events they describe, are filled with epic, multi-generational feuds that read like great tragedies. Are they an accurate reflection of daily life? Or did the authors cherry-pick the most extreme and violent events to create compelling narratives? Most historians agree that while the sagas might embellish the details, adding heroic speeches and dramatic confrontations, the underlying social mechanic of the feud was very real. It was the default method of dispute resolution when the formal legal system failed. A little-known aspect of this culture of vengeance is the role of women. While men did the actual fighting, women were often the inciters. They were the keepers of the family's honor, the ones who would shame their menfolk into action if they felt a wrong had not been properly avenged. In the sagas, you see wives and mothers presenting their husbands and sons with the bloody clothes of a slain kinsman, a powerful, silent demand for vengeance. They might use sharp, insulting poems, called Ni, to mock the rival family or to spur their own family to action. They wielded social pressure as a weapon. You live with this fear for months. Then one day, cooler heads prevail. Perhaps a powerful Jarl intervenes. Not wanting his followers to wipe each other out, he forces both families to negotiate a settlement. Your family scrapes together every piece of silver it has to offer a substantial WER guild. The other family, weary of the violence and the constant fear, accepts. Oaths are sworn. A tense peace settles over the landscape. Your cousin, the cause of all the trouble, is likely sent away, perhaps exiled to Iceland or joining a Viking crew heading for Russia. His presence no longer welcome. The feud is over, but the memory remains. You will never trust that other family again, and you know, with a chilling certainty, just how quickly your world can descend from peaceful farming into a desperate struggle for survival. One crisp autumn afternoon, while chopping wood, your axe slips and you open a deep, nasty gash on your leg. It's not life-threatening, not immediately, but it's bleeding profusely and it hurts. A lot. You limp back to the longhouse, calling for help. The modern part of your brain is screaming for an emergency room. Antiseptic wipes, sterile bandages, and a tetanus shot. What you get is the Viking Age equivalent. A mixture of practical folk wisdom and a heavy dose of magical thinking. Your mother or wife, the designated healer of the household, takes a look at the wound. Her first step is surprisingly practical. She will clean the wound, probably with clean water or maybe even ale, as the alcohol would have had a mild antiseptic effect. She might use a clean linen cloth to pack the wound and stop the bleeding. So far, so good, but then things get a little strange. She might chew on some yarrow, an herb known as soldier's woundwort, and spit the pulpy mash into your cut. While this sounds unsanitary, yarrow does have properties that can help blood clot. She might also apply a poultice of other herbs, some of which might have genuine, if mild, antibiotic or antifungal properties. The Norse had a decent knowledge of herbal remedies. They used middagswort for pain relief. It contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin, and various mosses, particularly Sagana moss. As wound dressings, Sagana moss is highly absorbent and has antiseptic qualities, making it a surprisingly effective natural bandage. This is where medicine and magic begin to blur. As she wraps your leg in a clean linen strip and a thick layer of moss, she might start chanting. She'll murmur charms and incantations over the wound, calling on the gods, particularly Ire, the goddess of healing, to knit your flesh back together. She might carve a rune, like Tyr, the rune of the sky, god associated with victory and justice, onto a piece of wood and lay it on your bandage, believing its power will fight off the evil spirits that cause infection. For you, this is not superstition. It's just medicine. The physical treatment and the magical treatment are two parts of the same whole. The herbs fix the body, and the charms fix the spirit. You wouldn't consider one without the other. But what if your condition was more serious? What if you had a raging fever, a persistent cough, or a painful internal ailment? The diagnosis would be based on a combination of observation and mythology. Sickness was often thought to be caused by supernatural forces, dwarves, elves, or malevolent spirits shooting invisible elf shot into your body. Therefore, the cure had to be supernatural. The local wise woman or cunning man might be called. They might perform a ritual to drive out the evil spirits, create a foul-tasting potion from dozens of ingredients, some helpful, some useless, some outright poisonous, or recommend a pilgrimage to a sacred well or stone. Surgery was a terrifying prospect, while Norse healers could set broken bones with some success, using splints and tightly wrapped bandages. Anything involving cutting into the body was incredibly risky. They did have iron surgical tools, probes, scalpels, and saws that archaeologists have found. Trepanation, the act of drilling a hole in the skull, perhaps to relieve pressure or release evil spirits, was performed, and some skeletons show signs of having survived the procedure. Amputations were a last resort, with a very low survival rate due to shock, blood loss, and subsequent infection. There was no anesthetic, only a leather strap to bite down on and maybe a large quantity of strong hail to dull the senses. This leads to a chilling debate among medical historians. Which was more likely to kill you, the illness or the cure? Some remedies were harmless, but others could be deadly. Potions could contain toxic plants. Procedures like bloodletting, meant to rebalance the body's humors, could fatally weaken an already sick person. The belief that disease was caused by worms could lead to bizarre treatments, like covering a dental abscess with a paste of earthworms and lard, which would only introduce more bacteria. One of the most peculiar and frankly horrifying tidbits of Viking medical practice comes from the sagas. In one story, a warrior has been wounded in the stomach. To determine if the intestine has been pierced, the healer feeds him a strong-smelling onion and leek soup. If the healer can then smell the onions through the wound, it means the gut is perforated, and the injury is declared untreatable. This onion test, while grim, shows a certain pragmatic, if brutal, diagnostic logic. There was no point attempting to save a man who was certain to die of sepsis. You lie on your platform, your leg throbbing. You've had the best care your time can offer. Now, it's a waiting game. If you're lucky, the practical measure is the cleaning. The moss will be enough. Your body will fight off the inevitable infection, and you'll heal, albeit with a nasty scar. But if a serious infection sets in, with its telltale redness, swelling, and fever, no amount of chanting or herbal poultices can save you. Gangrene could set in, and then your only options would be a horrific, high-risk amputation or a slow, painful death. For now, all you can do is rest. Sip the willow bark tea your mother brings you, and hope that the gods are listening. Weeks pass. Your leg has healed, leaving a ragged, impressive scar you can show off as a testament to your toughness. The harvest is in, the animals are secured, and the long nights of winter are beginning to draw in. The mood in the longhouse becomes more solemn, more spiritual. This is the time when the veil between the worlds feels thin, a time for communing with the gods and the ancestors. And sometimes, that communion demands the ultimate price. One evening, the Jarl, the chieftain of your lands, enters the longhouse. His face is grim. He announces that the harvest was not as bountiful as hoped. A sickness has been afflicting the cattle. The first winter storms have been unusually fierce. These are not just random misfortunes. They are signs. The gods are displeased. A simple offering of grain or ale at the local stone altar will not suffice. A great sacrifice, their blood, must be held to appease them and ensure the community has survival through the winter. The blood was a central ritual in Norse paganism. It was a feast, a ceremony, and a sacrifice all in one. Usually, the sacrifice involved animals, a horse, an ox, or a bull. Depending on the god being honored, the animal would be killed, and its blood would be collected in a ceremonial bowl. A priest or the chieftain himself would then use a twig or sprinkler to splash the blood on the statues of the gods and on the assembled people. This act of being sprinkled with blood was a way of sharing in the power of the sacrifice and bonding the community with the gods. The meat of the sacrificed animal would then be cooked in the great cauldrons over the fire and shared in a communal feast. It was a joyous, sacred, and unifying event, but tonight, the Jar Elest Owen suggests something more. He speaks of Thor, who needs to be placated to quell the storms, of Freyr, who needs to be encouraged for the fertility of the land and livestock next year. And sometimes, when the need is great, the gods demand more than an animal. This is the darkest and most controversial aspect of Norse religion, human sacrifice. For a long time, many historians wanted to dismiss the accounts of it as mere propaganda, written by horrified Christian monks to paint the Vikings as savage heathens. The sagas and other accounts, like that of the German chronicler Adam of Bremen, describe great sacrifices held every 9 years at the temple in Uppsala, Sweden, where men and animals were supposedly hung from the trees of a sacred grove until they rotted. It was easy to think these were exaggerations, but the archaeological evidence is unsettlingly supportive. In various sites across Scandinavia, bodies have been found in bogs and graves that show signs of ritual killing. The Osberger ship burial in Norway, a fantastically wealthy woman's grave, also contained the skeleton of an older woman who may have been sacrificed to accompany her distress into the afterlife. In another case, 4 individuals were found in a well at a Danish ring fortress. Their bones jumbled together in a way that suggests they were not given a standard burial. So who would be chosen? It would almost certainly be a thrall. Remember that third tier of society. This is one of the ultimate perils of being property. A thrall's life was not their own, and it could be forfeit for the good of the community. But it could also be a captured enemy warrior, a criminal, or even, in the most extreme and legendary cases, a king sacrificing himself or his own son to save his people. There is a famous, though likely mythical, story of a Swedish king who sacrificed 9 of his sons to Odin to prolong his own life. The Jarl doesn't say who will be chosen. The selection itself is a ritual. Lots might be drawn. The gods themselves might indicate a choice through some omen. You, as a Carl, a free man, are probably safe, but a chill runs down your spine nonetheless. You look at the thralls who live and work alongside you. You know them. You might even like them. But you also know that the survival of your family, your children, depends on a successful winter. The logic of the sacrifice is terrifyingly simple. One life is given so that many may live. The debate still rages in academic circles about the frequency and nature of human sacrifice. Was it a common, accepted practice for dire emergencies, or a very rare, semi-mythical event that occurred only in a few specific cultic centers? The evidence is too sparse to say for sure. That for you, sitting in the longhouse, it feels horribly real. You are part of a society that, when pushed to the brink, believes the path to divine favor can be paved with human blood. You won't be the one chosen, but you will have to stand there, spattered with the sacred blood alongside everyone else, and partake in the solemn feast that follows. You will do it because your worldview demands it, and you will pray that it works. The great blot is over, and the tense, hopeful quiet has settled on the community, but the anxieties of winter remain, and people seek more personal, more specific guidance than a communal sacrifice can offer. They need to know if a trading voyage will be successful, if a marriage will be fruitful, or if a sick child will recover. For this, they don't turn to the jar or the gods of war. They seek out the most mysterious and powerful figure in your spiritual landscape, the VOLVA. The VOLVA is a seeress, a prophetess, a practitioner of Norse magic known as seer. She is not a priestess of a specific temple. She is an itinerant wanderer, traveling from farmstead to farmstead, offering her services in exchange for food, lodging, and payment. Her arrival in a community is a major event, met with a mixture of awe, reverence, and fear. You hear she is staying at a neighboring farm, and your family decides to consult her. When you enter the longhouse where she is holding court, the atmosphere is electric. The VOLVA sits on a high seat, a special platform built just for her, often stuffed with chicken feathers. She is an older woman, but her age is impossible to guess. She is dressed in a striking, almost theatrical costume. She might wear a blue or black cloak, adorned with strange stones. On her head, a cap of black lambkins, lined with white cat skin. From her belt hangs a large leather pouch containing her magical paraphernalia, charms, talismans, and perhaps hallucinogenic herbs. She holds a staff, usually made of wood with a brass bound, stone-set knob at the top. This staff is the symbol of her power. She is not alone. She is surrounded by a circle of young women who sing special songs, or VARL ochre, designed to call the spirits and induce a trance. The air is thick with the sound of their eerie, hypnotic chanting. The VOLVA seems distant, her eyes unfocused, as if she is looking into another world. Consulting her is a formal ritual. Your family's patriarch approaches her respectfully and explains your concerns. Perhaps you want to know if it's a good year to risk sending a ship out for trade. The VOLVA doesn't answer directly. Her magic is not simple fortune-telling. It's a powerful and, for some, a shameful magic. It was considered unmanly for a man to practice seer, as it involved a level of spiritual receptivity and manipulation that was seen as feminine. Even Odin, the chief of the gods, who was the master of SDI drive, was sometimes mocked for practicing it. For a woman like the VOLVA, however, it was a source of immense status and power. As the chanting continues, the VOLVA's trance deepens. She begins to speak, her voice strange and hollow. She is not speaking her own words. She is a vessel for the spirits she has summoned. She might speak of a calm sea and a market full of silver in the east. She might speak of a sudden storm and a broken mast. Her prophecies are often cryptic, wrapped in poetic, ambiguous language. It is up to you to interpret them. The silver serpent will swim in calm waters, she might say, but beware the raiden's shadow on the shore. Does that mean the voyage will be profitable but the landing will be dangerous? Or is the raven a good omen, a sign of Odin's blessing? This ambiguity is key to her power. A specific, testable prediction could be proven wrong, undermining her authority. They evade. Poetic prophecy can be interpreted to fit whatever outcome eventually occurs. The historical reality of the VOLVA is one of the most fascinating and heavily debated topics in Norse studies. How much of their ritual was performance in psychology, and how much was based on a genuine belief system involving altered states of consciousness, skeletons of women buried with staffs, pouches of magical items, and seeds of potentially hallucinogenic plants like henbane have been found, lending archaeological weight to the literary descriptions in the sagas, like the famous account of the VOLVA Thorborg in the saga of Eric the Red. These staff bearers were clearly real and held a special, respected place in society. One of the less discussed elements of their practice was their perceived ability to not just see the future, but to influence it. Seer could also be used to cast spells, to bless or to curse, to aid in childbirth. or to bring madness upon an enemy. A Volva could be a benevolent healer and guide, but she could also be a dangerous witch. Disrespecting her or failing to pay her properly was a terrible idea. She could turn the fortunes of your entire family with a single curse. Your consultation is over. You'll leave a gift for her: a piece of silver, a fine piece of cloth, a promise of the best food from your stores. You walk out into the cold night, the strange chanting still echoing in your ears. You don't have a clear yes or no answer. Instead, you have a riddle, a piece of divine poetry to ponder over through the long winter nights. You feel a sense of comfort, having sought guidance from the spirit world, but also a new layer of uncertainty. The Volva has shown you a glimpse of your fate. You're weird, but the path is still yours to walk, and the raven shadow is now firmly lodged in your mind. The Volva has prophecy about the silver serpent swimming in calm waters echoes in your mind through the dark winter. As spring finally breaks the grip of the ice, the men of the community begin to get restless. The farm work is resuming, but there's a different energy in the air, a longing for something more than the cyclical toil of agriculture. It's the call of the sea, the promise of wealth, fame, and adventure. It's time to consider going Viking literally, on a Viking expedition. This is not a career choice you make lightly. It's a high-risk, high-reward gamble that could make you a wealthy and respected man, or leave your bones bleaching on a foreign shore. You gather with the other young, unlanded men of your village, listening to the plans of a local Jarlora seasoned sea captain. He speaks of the rich, poorly defended monasteries in England, the bustling markets of Frisia, or the silver-laden towns of the Slavic lands. He shows off a fine sword with a silver inlaid hilt or a beautiful silk cloak he won on a previous raid. The allure is powerful. If you're a younger son, this is especially tempting. Your older brother will inherit the family farm. Your prospects are limited. You can either work for your brother as a farmhand for the rest of your life, or you can try to make your own fortune. The sea offers a path to wealth and status that the land cannot. You could come back with enough silver to buy your own land, attract a good wife, and establish your own homestead. Your Doomista, your reputation would soar. You'd be the man who has seen the world, fought in battles, and won riches. People would listen to you at the thing. Bards might even compose verses about your deeds. So you decide to join. You swear an oath to the captain, becoming part of his crew, his Lee. You are now a member of a sworn brotherhood. Your share of the loot, or AHLUTR, will be determined by your role and status on the ship. The captain and the veteran warriors will get a larger share, but even as a novice, you are guaranteed a piece of whatever you plunder. Your family's reaction is mixed. Your mother worries, packing you extra dried fish and a new pair of woolen socks, her face a mask of anxiety. Your father, though he might have gone on raids in his youth, gives you a stoic nod of approval. It is the way of things. He gives you the family's heirloom axe, not a huge, two-handed battleaxe from fantasy movies, but a sturdy, practical wood-cutting axe that can just as easily be used as a weapon. It is sharp, well-balanced, and you know how to use it. That is your primary weapon. Swords are incredibly expensive, the mark of a truly wealthy warrior or agile. Most Vikings fought with the tools they had: axes, spears, and long knives called a sea axe. You might also have a simple, round wooden shield with an iron boss in the center to protect your hand. You have no helmet or armor. That, like a sword, is a luxury you have to earn. The decision to go raiding introduces a subtle but important historical distinction that is often missed. The word Viking was not an ethnic identity. You wouldn't call yourself a Viking in the same way you'd call yourself a Norseman or a Dane. Viking was a job description, an activity. To go Viking was to participate in one of these overseas expeditions. The man who spent the summer raiding in Ireland and the winter farming in Norway was a farmer who sometimes went Viking. He was a Viking arcity. This is a point that historians often emphasize to separate the specific act of raiding from the broader Norse culture. There's also the question of why the Viking Age started when it did. Why, in the late 8th century, did these waves of Norsemen suddenly burst out of Scandinavia? There's no single answer, and academics have been arguing about it for centuries. Was it overpopulation in their homelands, forcing younger sons to seek land and fortune elsewhere? Was it a political reaction to the southward expansion of Charlemagne's powerful Frankish Empire? Was it driven by new shipbuilding technology that made longer sea voyages possible? Or was it simply that they learned of the immense, poorly protected wealth concentrated in Christian monasteries and saw an opportunity too good to pass up? The most likely answer is a complex combination of all these factors. You say your farewells. You promise to return before the next winter, laden with silver and stories. You join the rest of the crew, a motley collection of tough farmers, skilled craftsmen, and a few seasoned veterans, all walking towards the fjord where the long ship is waiting. The Volvas prophecy is in your mind. The silver serpent will swim in calm waters. You look at the sleek, powerful ship with its carved dragon head glaring out at the sea. It does look like a serpent. You take it as a good omen. For now, the fear is overshadowed by the thrill of possibility. You are no longer just a farmer's son. You are a warrior, a sea rover, an adventurer. You are going Viking. The ship that awaits you in the fjord is a masterpiece of engineering and art, the pinnacle of your people's technology. It's an air or a langskip longship. It's low in the water, long and slender, looking both elegant and aggressive. Its shallow draft means it can navigate in water only a few feet deep, allowing it to sail up rivers and strike far inland, taking enemies by surprise. This single design feature is a key reason for the success of Viking raids. You are not just a passenger on this voyage. You are part of the construction crew. Building a longship is a massive communal effort that takes months, sometimes years. It begins with selecting the right trees. The shipbuilder, a highly respected master craftsman, walks through the forest, looking for tall, straight oaks for the whole planks and the massive, single piece of timber needed for the keel. He looks for naturally curved trees for the ribs of the ship, using the wood's own strength and shape, rather than trying to force straight planks into a curve. This is a crucial element of their design, making the hull both strong and flexible. The trees are felled, and then, in a fashionably clever non-industrial process, the planks are not sawn, but split, using wedges and mallets. The shipwrights split the logs radially, like slices of a pie. This method follows the grain of the wood, resulting in planks that are far stronger and more flexible than sawn boards. It's also incredibly wasteful of wood, which tells you something about the vast, old-growth forests that were available to them. You spend weeks with an adze and an axe, hewing these split logs into thin, smooth planks, each one shaped for its specific place in the hull. The work is precise and exhausting. The planks are then clinker-built, meaning each plank overlaps the one below it, like weatherboarding on a house. This creates the distinctive, ridged look of a Viking hull. You then have to fasten the planks together. This is done with hand-forged iron rivets, thousands of them. It's a two-man job, one person on the outside with a hammer, and one on the inside with a heavy piece of iron and dolly to clinch the rivet. The longhouse rings with the tink-tink of riveting for days on end. Between the overlapping planks, you have to caulk the seams to make the ship watertight. This is a smelly, messy job. You take tar, produced by slowly burning pine roots in a special kiln, and mix it with animal hair or UNS horn wool. You then force the sticky, black goo into every single crack and seam of the hull. Your hands will be stained with tar for weeks. Finally, the great mast is raised, carved from a single, towering pine tree, and the huge, square sail is hoisted. This sail, woven from coarse wool and likely reinforced with leather, is the ship's engine. It's what makes long-distance voyages across the open ocean possible. Historians are still debating exactly how these square-rigged ships were able to sail against the wind, while they cowed and tack into the wind as effectively as later triangular-rigged ships. Evidence suggests they had some sophisticated techniques using a special pole called a bead ass to push the sail out and achieve a degree of upwind travel. The ship is finished with the carving of the fearsome dragon or serpent head on the prow. This wasn't just for decoration. It was a powerful totem meant to ward off evil sea spirits and to terrify your enemies. These figureheads were often unremovable. You would take them down when approaching friendly shores, so as not to frighten the local spirits of the land. Now, standing before the finished product, you feel a sense of collective pride. This vessel, maybe 75 feet long and only 15 feet wide, is capable of carrying you and 40 or 50 other men across the notoriously rough North Sea. But as you prepare to board, the reality of the journey sets in. Look closely at the ship. There are no cabins. There is no shelter. It is an open boat. You will live, eat, and sleep on the deck, exposed to the wind, the rain, and the constant sea spray. The deck is just a loose collection of floorboards that cover the ribs, under which you store your gear, your food, and any cargo. Your personal space is the width of the sea chest you brought with you. This chest holds your meager possessions, a spare tunic, your woolen cloak, a whetstone for your axe. During the day, you sit on this chest to row. At night, you might try to huddle under the sail if it's lowered, or wrap yourself in your cloak and try to sleep on the hard wooden chest, wedged between your crewmates. It is profoundly uncomfortable. This sleek, beautiful serpent is not a cruise liner. It is a weapon, a tool, a transport, and for the next few weeks, this open, windswept plank of wood will be your entire world. It is both a marvel of ancient naval architecture and a potential coffin. The jarl gives the signal. The heavy mooring ropes are cast off, and the longship glides away from the shore. The women and old men of your village stand watching, their forms shrinking against the vast backdrop of the fjord. A few of the men begin to row, their long oars dipping into the calm, dark water to guide the ship towards the open sea. This is the last moment of peace you will have for a long time. As you clear the protective arm of the fjord, you meet the raw, untamed power of the North Atlantic. The change is immediate and violent. The ship, which felt so stable in the sheltered water, now begins to rise and fall on the massive ocean swells. The wind whips at the great square sail, which booms and cracks like thunder. The sea spray, shockingly cold, lashes across the deck, drenching you to the skin. There is nowhere to hide. This is the moment you discover, if you have sea legs, many of the first-timers, and even some veterans, succumb to seas and scuss. The cramped conditions mean there's no dignified way to be ill. You just lean over the side and hope you don't get washed overboard by a rogue wave. Your primary fear on this journey isn't pirates or sea monsters. Those sailors certainly told stories of the kraken and other beasts of the deep. Your real enemy is the ocean itself and your own navigational ignorance. Look around the ship. What's missing? There is no map room. There is no compass. There is no astrolabe, no sextant, no GPS. The magnetic compass was known in China, but it wouldn't reach Europe for another couple of 100 years. You are crossing one of the most treacherous bodies of water on the planet, using nothing but raw skill, memory, and observation. The captain is the master navigator. He stands at the stern, by the large steering oar, his eyes constantly scanning the world around him. His primary tool is the sun. He has a simple wooden disc, perhaps a solar stein or sunstone, which some historians speculate could have been a polarizing crystal, like Iceland spar, allowing him to locate the sun's position even on an overcast day. This is a highly debated piece of Viking technology. While mentioned in the sagas, no definitive archaeological example has been found, leaving academics to argue whether it was a real or a legendary artifact. At night, he uses the stars. He knows the constellations of the northern sky like the back of his hand and uses Polaris, the North Star, to keep a steady course. But what happens when a storm rolls in and you can't see the sun or the stars for days on end? This is when the true terror begins. A storm at sea in an open longship is a nightmare. The waves become mountains of black water that crash over the sides, threatening to swamp the vessel. Every man who is not desperately trying to manage the sail, or the steering, or is bailing. You grab your wooden bucket, or even your own helmet if you have one, and you scoop and throw water in a frantic, exhausting rhythm. The wind howls, the rain or sleet falls in blinding sheets, and the cold seeps into your bones. A deep, painful ache that no amount of wool can keep out. Hypothermia is a constant, deadly threat. You are wet, you are cold, and you are terrified. The beautiful dragon ship now feels like a fragile nutshell at the mercy of a wrathful god. Many ships that set out from the fjords simply vanished without a trace, lost to the storms, even without a storm. Navigation is an art form. The captain reads the patterns of the waves. He observes the flight of seabirds. A flock of gannets heading out in the morning means land is in that direction, and a flock returning at night confirms it. He watches for the color of the water, the presence of seaweed, or even the distant loom of a cloud bank that often forms over landmass. Some sagas even tell of navigators releasing a raven from the ship, like the legendary Floki V. Ilge Arson, who was said to have used ravens to find Iceland. If the raven circled and returned to the ship, there was no land nearby. If it flew off in a straight line, you followed it. You are completely dependent on the skill of this one man, his memory of coastlines, his interpretation of the sky, his feel for the sea. These are the only things keeping you from becoming hopelessly lost in the vast, gray emptiness of the ocean. You huddle on your sea chest, chewing on a piece of hard, salty dried fish, your hands raw from the oars and the wet ropes. You stare out at the endless horizon, and you feel profoundly small and vulnerable. The Volva's prophecy spoke of calm waters, but she said nothing about the sheer, terrifying emptiness you have to cross to find them. Days bleed into one another, marked only by the shifting light of the sun and the changing of the watch. The initial thrill of the adventure has long since worn off, replaced by a grim, monotonous routine. Life aboard the long ship is a masterclass in boredom and discomfort. Your world has shrunk to the length and breadth of this vessel. You are packed shoulder to shoulder with 40 other men. The smell is potent. It's a rich blend of unwashed bodies, damp wool, bilge water, tar, and the lingering scent of sea's inskis. Personal hygiene is a distant memory. There's no fresh water for washing. You might get rinsed by a wave or a rainstorm, but that's about it. Your diet is as monotonous as your surroundings. The kitchen is a stone-lined box in the middle of the ship where a small, carefully controlled fire might be lit on a calm day. Most of the time, however, cooking is impossible. Your meals consist of what can be eaten cold. You gnaw on strips of leathery dried fish. Salt cod was a staple. Hardtack, a rock-hard biscuit of flour and water that had to be soaked in water, or ale to be edible, and maybe some sour, dried meat to drink. You have water and ale stored in wooden barrels. The water quickly becomes stale and slimy, but the ale, thanks to the alcohol, remains safer to drink for longer. It's not strong, more of a weak, fermented grain beverage, but it's a vital source of calories and hydration. This limited diet puts you at serious risk for nutritional deficiencies, most famously scurvy. After weeks at sea without any fresh fruit or vegetables, the lack of vitamin C begins to take its toll. Your gums become swollen and bleed. Old scars can reopen. You feel a profound lethargy and weakness. Your teeth might loosen in their sockets. If the journey lasts too long, scurvy can be a fatal disease, turning a strong crew of warriors into a listless collection of invalids. The Vikings didn't understand the science of vitamins, but they likely knew from experience that certain foods, like the cloudberries or scurvy grass they could find on shore, could prevent or cure this dreaded ailment until you can make landfall. However, the risk is very real. To pass the endless hours, you and your crewmates find ways to entertain yourselves. You gamble, using carved bone dice to wager small personal items or your future share of the loot. You tell stories long, complicated sagas recited from memory, tales of gods, heroes, and epic feuds. You sing songs, boisterous and bawdy tunes that can be heard over the rush of the wind and waves. You might also engage in a very Viking form of entertainment, Poetic duels. Two men will trade witty, often insulting, improvised verses. A battle of wits that values clever wordplay and sharp rhymes. You also have work to do. There are always ropes to check, sails to mend with a bone, needle, and thread, and doors to man when the wind dies. Rowing a long ship is grueling, back-breaking labor. You sit on your sea chest, facing the stern, and pull the long, heavy or in time with the man in front of you. The rhythm is relentless, hour after hour, until your muscles scream and your hands are covered in blisters. The cramped quarters inevitably lead to friction. Tempers flare over a misplaced tool, a gambling dispute, or just the sheer annoyance of being in someone's space for weeks on end. The captain has to be a strong leader to maintain discipline. He resolves disputes with swift, firm justice. A serious breach of the ship's rules could see a man put ashore on the next deserted island you pass, or in the worst cases, thrown overboard. The unity of the crew is paramount. A ship divided by infighting is a ship destined for disaster. One of the less glorious but essential items on board is the bailer. Often called an osterker, it's basically a large, wooden scoop with a handle. Because the long ship sits so low in the water and is an open vessel, it's constantly taking on water. Even in calm seas, a team is always on bailing duty, scooping the cold, sloshing water from the bilge and heaving it over the side. It's a never-ending, thankless task. Historians examining the floorboards of sunken longships often find them worn smooth than the areas where the bailers would have constantly scraped. You spend a lot of time just staring at the sea, lost in your thoughts. You think about your home, the smell of the wood smoke in the longhouse, the taste of fresh milk. You wonder if you made the right decision. The promise of silver feels very far away. The reality is the sweat, cold, stinking, crowded, and boring existence. This is the unglamorous truth of the Viking voyage. It's not a heroic dash across the waves. It's a long, slow, miserable slog. And as another grey dawn breaks over a grey sea, your only comfort is the hope that land, any land, is just over the horizon. After what feels like an eternity, a cry goes up from the bow. Land. You scramble to your feet, your heart pounding. On the horizon, a thin, dark line separates the grey sea from the grey sky. As you sail closer, the line resolves into a green and pleasant coastline, dotted with small settlements and, most promisingly, the stone tower of a church. This is it. This is the coast of Anglo-Saxon England. The misery of the voyage is forgotten, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and predatory anticipation. The captain steers the ship towards the mouth of a river. He gives the order to lower the mast and take down the iconic dragon head from the prow. This is a tactical move. With the mast down, your ship looks like any other local trading vessel from a distance, allowing you to get closer without raising an alarm. The VOLVA's prophecy comes back to you. Beware the raven shadow on the shore. The raven was a symbol of Odin, but also a carrion bird. The meaning suddenly feels much clearer and much more ominous. Under the power of muffled doors, you glide silently up the river. The land here is lush and flat, so different from your rugged homeland. You see sheep grazing in green fields, unwell-tended crops. It looks soft. It looks rich. The target is a monastery, a place your captain knows from traders' reports is a repository of wealth. These Christian holy places were not built to be fortresses. They were centers of prayer and learning, filled with gold chalices, silver crosses, and jewel-encrusted gospel books, items of immense value to you, but poorly protected. To the monks, they were treasures for the glory of God. To you, they are just silver and gold. The ship beaches on a muddy bank a short distance from the monastery. The order is given. You grab your axe and your wooden shield. Your heart is hammering against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and excitement. This is the moment everything has been building towards. You and 40 other men swarm out of the ship, forming a loose shield wall, and begin to jog towards the settlement. The scene is one of chaos and terror, but it is not the mindless, berserker rage of movies. This is a professional operation. Your goal is portable wealth. The attack is swift and brutal. You don't waste time on a protracted fight. The element of surprise is your greatest weapon. You reach the monastery walls. The few monks who stand in your way are unarmed and easily swept aside. The air fills with the sounds of splintering wood as doors are kicked in, and the terrified shouts of the inhabitants. You rush into the main chapel. Your eyes, accustomed to the gloom of the longhouse, are dazzled by the richness of the place. Light streams through stained glass windows, illuminating golden candlesticks on the altar and silver inlaid chests. Your job is to grab whatever you can. You use your axe to smash open a locked wooden chest, revealing a pile of silver coins and finely wrought jewelry. Another man is ripping the gilded plates off a large book. Someone else is stuffing a tapestry into a sack. There is no reverence here. These sacred objects are stripped of their meaning and reduced to their material value. And then there is the violence. It is sudden, impersonal, then grim. Any man who offers resistance is cut down. The random, wanton killing is not the main objective. A living, healthy captive is far more valuable than a corpse. You and your crewmates are also looking for human loot. Young men and women are rounded up, their hands bound. They will become thralls, to be sold in the slave markets of Dublin or Hidibai, or to be taken back to your farm to do the hard labor. They are terrified, weeping, and you look at them with a cold, appraising eye. A strong-looking young man is worth more than an older one. This is the brutal calculus of your economy. The image of the Viking warrior as a berserker fighter who enters a trance-like, uncontrollable fury is one of the most famous tropes, but also one of the most debated. Did berserkers really exist? The sagas describe them as elite warriors who fought with a frenzied rage, biting their shields and feeling no pain. Some historians speculate they may have used hallucinogenic mushrooms or other substances to induce this state. Others argue it was a form of psychological warfare, a cultivated, terrifying battle fury that was more performance than trance. Or perhaps it was simply a literary invention to describe exceptionally fierce fighters. In any case, you are not a berserker. You are a pragmatic farmer turned raider, and you are focused on the job. Get the loot, get the thralls, and get out before the local Anglo-Saxon lord, the GN, can rally his soldiers and mount a counterattack. The raid is over in less than an hour. You retreat to your ship, laden with plunder and dragging your new captives. The sky behind you is now black with the smoke from the burning monastery buildings. You push the long ship back into the water and hoist the sail, catching the outbound tide. As you sail away, leaving a scene of devastation behind you, you don't feel like a hero from a saga. You feel a strange mixture of elation at your newfound wealth and a hollow sickness in the pit of your stomach. You have survived. You are rich. But the raven's shadow now feels like it's resting on your own shoulder. The mood on the ship during the journey home is vastly different from the miserable slog of the outbound voyage. The sea is still cold and the accommodations are just as cramped. But now, there is a current of triumphant energy running through the crew. The hold of the ship, once filled with meager supplies, is now laden with the fruits of your raid. Sacks of silver coins, glittering jewelry, fine textiles, and religious artifacts stripped of their sacredness clink and shift with the rocking of the waves. And then there are the thralls. The half-dozen or so captives you took are huddled together in the open space of the deck, shivering with cold and fear. They are a constant, sullen presence, a reminder of the human cost of your new wealth. For you, this is the end of a successful business trip. For them, it is the end of their world. The first order of business once you are safely out at sea is to divide the plunder. This is a critical moment that can make or break the cohesion of a crew. The captain stands near the mast, and the loot is piled before him. Every man gathers around, his eyes fixed on the glittering heap. There is a formal system for this, based on the oaths you all swore before setting out. The captain and the ship's owner, if they are different people, get a large, predetermined share. The veteran warriors, the ones with their own mail shirts and swords, get a full share. You, as a novice with just your axe and shield, might get a half share. The process is surprisingly orderly. The captain or his second-in-command sorts the loot into piles of roughly equal value. A silver chalice might be deemed equal to a certain number of coins and a fine cloak. Then, Lots are drawn to determine who gets which pile. This element of chance helps to prevent arguments that one man's pile is better than another's. It's a system designed for fairness among thieves. You watch with bated breath as your name is called and you are assigned your portion. You run your hands through a small leather bag of silver coins, heft a surprisingly heavy bronze candlestick, and wrap a finely woven, brightly dyed woolen cloak around your shoulders. It is more wealth than you have ever seen in your life. The second order of business is tending to the wounded. The raid was swift, but not bloodless. One of your crewmates took a nasty cut to his arm. Another has a festering puncture wound from a pitchfork. Now, far from the adrenaline of battle, the pain and the risk of infection set in. The ship's medic, who is likely just an older warrior with some experience in patching people up, gets to work. He cleans the wounds with seawater or ale. A painful but necessary process. He might have a small kit with a needle and gut thread to stitch up the worst gashes. The wound is then packed with the same Sagana moss you used back home, a proven and effective dressing. But, as with medicine on land, magic plays its part. The healer will chant over the wounds, perhaps carving runes onto the bandages to speed healing. There's a famous charm, recorded in an old High German manuscript, a pagan spell that survived in a Christian text, which describes how to heal a lame horse by chanting and tying up the limb. It's believed similar charms were used for men. How well these treatments work is a matter of luck. A clean cut might heal well, but a deep wound from a dirty farm tool is very likely to become infected. Without antibiotics, a simple wound that would be trivial today could easily lead to a slow death from sepsis during the journey home. One of your shipmates is already feverish, his arms swollen and dread. The others look at him with a mixture of pity and grim pragmatism. If he dies before you reach home, his share of the loot will be divided among the rest of the crew. This brings up a persistent debate among scholars. How effective was Viking armor? You see fantastic suits of leather and mail in movies, but the reality was different. Most raiders, like you, had no armor at all beyond a thick wool tunic and a shield. Leather armor, if it existed in a hardened form, which is itself debated, would offer some protection from cuts, but not from a solid blow or a spear thrust. The mail shirt, or byrnie, made of thousands of interlinked iron rings, was the pinnacle of personal protection. It was incredibly effective, but it was also astronomically expensive. The price of a small farming took countless hours to make. Only a jar, or a very wealthy, professional warrior could afford one. For the average Viking, the shield was their life. Learning to use it effectively, to block, to parry, to punch with the central iron boss, was the key to survival. Use it on your sea chest, your new cloak wrapped around you for warmth, your small pile of silver safely stowed. You are a survivor. You are rich. But across the deck, the moans of the wounded man and the quiet sobbing of the captives are a constant reminder of the brutal price of your success. The raid was a success, but the life of a full-time warrior, with its constant risk of a violent death, isn't for everyone. Perhaps the terror of the storm on the open sea or the sight of a dying crew mate has soured you on the Viking life. You have your share of the plunder, a small pouch of silver that represents a significant starting capital. You realize there might be another way to leverage the power of the long ship in the reach of your people. A path that trades the axe for the merchant's scales. You decide to become a kopmar, a merchant. This doesn't mean you hang up your weapons. The line between a raider and a trader was often blurry, to the point of being non-existent. A Viking merchant ship arriving at a foreign port was an armed trading expedition. The crew was prepared to trade peacefully if the terms were good, but they were equally prepared to take what they wanted by force if the opportunity arose. The sagas are full of characters who are described as alternating between trading and raiding on the same voyage. It was all about opportunity assessment. Your first step is to invest your newfound wealth. You might pool your silver with a few other men to buy a share in a different kind of vessel, not the sleek, aggressive long ship built for war, but a nair. The nair is the workhorse of the Viking sea lanes. It's shorter, wider, and deeper than a long ship, with a much larger cargo capacity. It's slower and less maneuverable, but it's a sturdy, reliable vessel designed to carry goods, not warriors. Next, you need something to trade. What do you have that the rest of the world wants? You live in the north, a land of vast forests and cold seas. Your primary exports are products of this environment. You might load your Nair with high-quality furs, bear, fox, marten, which are in high demand in the wealthy cities of Europe and the Middle East. You could trade in walrus ivory, a precious commodity carved into luxury goods, or the incredibly strong rope made from walrus hide. You might trade in amber, the fossilized tree resin known as Nordic gold, which washed up on the shores of the Baltic Sea. Other key exports were soapstone, which was carved into durable cooking pots, and, of course, drills. The slave trade was a massive and brutally profitable part of the Viking economy. With your cargo loaded, you set sail. Your destinations are the great trading hubs of the age. You might sail south to Hidibai, a massive, bustling port city on the border of Denmark in modern-day Germany. Here, you would find merchants from all over Europe, trading Frankish wine, glass, and pottery for your northern goods. You might continue west to Dublin, a city founded by Vikings that had become the nexus of a vast slave trade and a marketplace for goods from around the Irish Sea. Or, you could take the far more arduous and dangerous eastern route. This involved sailing across the Baltic Sea, and then dragging your ship overland between river systems in what is now Russia and Ukraine. This journey, known to the local Slavs as the route from the VA or Aegeans to the Greeks, was the highway that connected Scandinavia to the two wealthiest empires of the age, the Byzantine Empire and the Abbasid Caliphate. Imagine the scene. You and your crew, deep in a vast, primordial forest, heaving your Nair over log rollers for miles to get from one river to the next, constantly on guard against hostile local tribes. It was a journey of incredible hardship, but the prize was worth it. At the end of the line lay Constantinople, which the Norse called Augir, the great city, the capital of Byzantium. Here, you could trade your rough northern furs and thralls for silk, spices, wine, and silver luxuries beyond imagination back in your smoky longhouse. This route also brought you into contact with the Arab world. Archaeologists have found vast hoards of Arab silver coins, called dirhams, all over Scandinavia, a testament to the scale of this trade. These coins were valued not for their face value but for their weight in pure silver. A Viking merchant carried a small, portable set of folding scales to weigh out payments, a practice that highlights their pragmatic, bullion-based economy. One of the most fascinating but debated aspects of this trade is the so-called Buddha from Helgo. At a Viking Age trading site in Sweden called Helgo, archaeologists found a small bronze statue of the Buddha, originating from northern India. How did it get there? Was it traded hand-to-hand along the entire length of the Silk Road and then up the Russian rivers? Was it the personal souvenir of a single, incredibly well-traveled Norse merchant? Or was it simply part of a larger shipment of scrap metal? Its religious significance completely unknown to the Vikings who melted down similar objects. It's a mystery that perfectly captures the vast, interconnected world these merchants operated in. As a merchant, your life is still risky. You face storms, pirates, and treacherous local politics, but the rewards are immense. You are not just moving goods. You are a conduit for culture, technology, and ideas. You see the world, learn new languages, and witness civilizations far grander than your own. You return home not just with silver and silk, but with a new perspective. You are a key player in the network that is slowly but surely stitching the fragmented post-Roman world back together. And all it took was a little seed money from one violent afternoon in England. After years of successful, if perilous, trading voyages, you have become a wealthy and respected man. You have a fine longhouse, a loyal crew, and more silver than you ever dreamed of. But the sea is a young man's game, and the constant travel has worn you down. You hear stories, whispers carried on the trade winds, of a new venture, something even bolder than raiding or trading. You hear of men sailing west, not for a summer of plunder, but to build a new life on new land. This is the call of the colonist. The idea begins in Iceland. By your time, Iceland has been settled by Norsemen for a generation or two. They fled Norway to escape the growing power of kings like Harald Fairhair, who was trying to unify the country and impose taxes. Iceland was a blank slate, a vast, volcanic island with no native population, where a man could be his own master. It was governed by a commonwealth of chieftains at the Althing, the great national assembly and echo of the local things you grew up with, but on a grander scale. But now, even Iceland is starting to feel crowded. The best pastoral land along the coasts has all been claimed. A man named Eric the Red, an Icelandic chieftain exiled for killing a few too many of his neighbors in a feud, has sailed even further west. He returned with tales of a vast new land, a place with green, lush fjords perfect for grazing cattle. In a brilliant, if somewhat deceptive, feat of marketing, he called it Greenland. He argued that a good name would attract settlers, and it worked. You decide to join the next wave of colonists heading for Greenland. This is a different kind of journey. You aren't just packing your sea chest. You are moving your entire world. You sell your trading there and invest in a larger, sturdier vessel. On board, you load not just your family and a few loyal thralls, but the essential components for starting a new farm from scratch. You bring your precious livestock, a few cows, a dozen sheep, maybe a pig or two huddled together in the open hold. You bring sacks of seed grain, your essential farming tools, your loom for weaving, and your blacksmithing equipment. Your ship is a floating barn, a noisy, smelly, and incredibly crowded ark. The journey to Greenland is even more dangerous than the one to England. You are sailing into the heart of the North Atlantic, a region of notorious icebergs and ferocious storms. You navigate by the same old method: sun, stars, and seal, but the stakes are higher. If you are blown off course, there is nothing but thousands of miles of empty ocean. After a terrifying, weeks-long voyage, you spot the towering, ice-capped mountains of Greenland. As you navigate into one of the deep fjords on the southwestern coast, you see that Eric's description was half true. There are indeed patches of green pastoral and nestled at the base of the mountains, but the landscape is dominated by a colossal, permanent ice sheet. It is a stark, beautiful, and profoundly intimidating environment. This is the very edge of the European world. You and the other colonists set up a farmstead in what becomes known as the Eastern Settlement. You build a longhouse, not from timber, which is incredibly scarce here, but from turf and stone. It is a low, bunker-like structure, built to withstand the howling winds. Life is hard, harder than it ever was in Norway. The growing season is perilously short. You can grow barley and a few hardy vegetables, but your primary sustenance comes from your livestock. You spend the short summer frantically cutting and storing hay to feed them through the impossibly long, dark winter. You adapt. You learn to hunt the seals that haul out on the coastal ice, their meat becoming a staple of your diet and their blubber a vital source of oil for your lamps. You hunt caribou in the hills. You fish for cod in the fjords. You are no longer just a farmer. You are a subsistence hunter, living on the margins of what the land and sea will provide. One of the most persistent academic debates about the Greenland colony is why it ultimately failed. The Norse lived there for over 400 years, a testament to their incredible resilience. But by the 15th century, the settlements were gone. Was it the Little Ice Age, a period of global cooling that made their already marginal farming practices impossible? Was it a refusal to adapt their diet and learn from the local Inuit people, who had mastered Arctic survival? Skeletons from the late period of the colony show signs of severe malnutrition. Did they lose contact with Europe, cutting them off from vital supplies like iron? Or was it a combination of all these factors? A slow, grinding decline into extinction. A fascinating and little-known fact is that the Greenlanders were, for a time, the westernmost extension of Christendom. They had their own bishop-built small stone churches, the ruins of which can still be seen today. They were part of the European world, yet utterly isolated. From this precarious foothold in Greenland, the Viking spirit of exploration takes one final, Astonishingly, Leif Erikson, the son of Eric the Red, sails even further west, following tales from a trader who was blown off course. He and his crew become the first Europeans to set foot in North America. Nearly 500 years before Columbus, they establish a small, short-lived settlement at a place they call Vinland, the land of wine, named for the wild grapes they found there. The archaeological site of Ellen So Meadows in Newfoundland is now widely accepted as this Norse outpost. You, as a colonist in Greenland, hear the stories of Vinland, but the voyages there are long and dangerous, and relations with the native peoples, whom the Norse called Askearlingar, are hostile. The dream of a new world to the west dies out. You remain in Greenland, on the edge of the world, your life a testament to the incredible ambition and tragic limitations of your people. You have sailed further than almost any European could imagine, only to find yourself clinging to a sliver of green in a world of ice. Throughout this journey, from the smoky longhouse to the icy shores of Greenland, you might have noticed that while men are doing the raiding, trading, and exploring, the women are far from passive bystanders. Let's shift the camera from your perspective for a moment and focus on the woman who has been running your farmstead in your absence. Your wife. Her life is not one of adventure on the high seas, but it is one of immense responsibility and a surprising degree of power. The common image of a Viking woman is often one of two extremes: the shield maiden, a fierce warrior fighting alongside the men, or the downtrodden domestic drudge. The reality, as is so often the case, is far more complex and interesting. Let's start with the shield maiden. Did she exist? This is one of the most heated debates in Viking studies today. The sagas and certain historical accounts mention women fighting as warriors. The most famous example is the legend of Lager Tha. For a long time, these were dismissed as literary fantasy. However, in 2017, a major DNA study was conducted on a heist at a 10th century warrior grave in Birka, Sweden. The grave contained a full set of weapons: a sword, an axe, spears, and the remains of 2 horses. For over a century, it was assumed the skeleton belonged to a man. The DNA analysis proved the warrior was biologically female. This discovery sent shockwaves through the historical community. Does this one grave prove that shield maidens were a common phenomenon? Or was this an exceptional individual, a woman who lived as a warrior in a society that, for the most part, assigned that role to men? The academic jury is still out, but it has forced a major re-evaluation of the evidence. For the vast majority of women, however, their power was not wielded with an axe, but with a set of keys. When you, her husband, were away going Viking, she became the sole manager of the farmstead. She was the Aetuas Freja, the lady of the house. A common symbol of this status was a set of keys, which she would wear hanging from her belt or a brooch. These keys unlocked the food stores, the chests of valuables, the very wealth of the household. They were a potent, visible symbol of her authority and responsibility. Her domain was the infield, the area around the longhouse. She managed the household finances, supervised the thralls, and oversaw all the domestic production. This was no small task. Domestic work in the Viking Age was a full-scale industrial operation. She was in charge of all food production that didn't happen in the fields: milking the cows and sheep, churning butter, making cheese, slaughtering smaller animals, preserving food for the winter. Her most time-consuming and economically vital task was textile production. Turning raw wool from the sheep into finished cloth was a multi-state, incredibly laborious process. The wool had to be cleaned, carded, and then spun into thread using a simple drop spindle. It took countless hours of spinning to produce enough thread for a single garment. Then, the thread had to be dyed using natural pigments from plants, a complex and skilled process. Finally, the dyed thread was woven into cloth on a large, uptight loom. The cloth they produced was not just for the family's clothing. It was also a major trade good. The huge, woolen sails that powered the long ships were a product of this female-led industry. Viking women also held a surprising number of legal rights compared to their contemporaries in other parts of Europe. They could inherit property. They had a right to a divorce. If a marriage ended, a woman was entitled to reclaim her share of the wealth accumulated during the marriage. The grounds for divorce could be as serious as abuse or as simple as a husband wearing clothes that were considered unmanly or too effeminate, like a shirt with a plunging neckline. A woman could also be divorced by her husband, of course, but the process acknowledged her as an individual with legal standing, not as mere property. Of course, her life was still constrained by the patriarchal structure of society. Marriages were typically arranged by families to forge alliances or consolidate wealth. Her primary value was seen in her ability to run a household and produce heirs to continue the family line. But within that framework, she wielded real power. A well-run farmstead, a healthy family, and a full storehouse were a direct reflection of her competence and hard work. Her doomster, her reputation, was just as important as her husband's. A capable, intelligent, and industrious wife was a massive asset to any family. So, when you finally return from your trading voyage or your Greenland adventure, you don't return to a helpless damsel in distress. You return to a business partner who has kept your entire enterprise afloat in your absence. She will want a full accounting of your profits, and she will have a strong opinion on how that new wealth should be invested. She is the anchor of your world, the one who turns the chaotic spoils of raiding and the risky profits of trade into a stable, functioning, and prosperous home. Her story is not one of swords and sails, but without her, the Viking Age as we know it could not have existed. You return from your adventures whether raiding, trading, or colonizing just as the first bite of autumn chills the air. You've brought wealth, stories, and maybe a few new scars. But now you face an enemy that no axe and defeating no ship can outrun. The Scandinavian winter. This is not just a season. It's a siege. For the next 5 or 6 months, your world will shrink to the confines of your farmstead, and your life will become a slow, patient battle for survival. The first sign of the Great Retreat is the movement of the animals. The cattle, sheep, and goats are brought in from the high summer pastures and herded into the longhouse, or adjoining by rays. They will spend the entire winter indoors, a living, breathing insurance policy and a source of welcome. The smelly warmth. Their survival depends entirely on the hay you and your family spent the summer harvesting. If the hay runs out before the spring thaw, the animals will starve, and your family's future will be in jeopardy. The world outside drains of color and life. The days become ridiculously short. In the heart of winter, you might only get a few hours of murky, gray twilight. The rest of the time is darkness, a profound and depressive blackness that is broken only by the flickering light of the central fire in the longhouse and the dim, greasy glow of a few soapstone lamps burning fish oil or seal blubber. This eternal night has a deep psychological effect, a condition we might now call seasonal affective disorder. The Norse called it vat-var-ung-gt, the winter heaviness. With the outdoor work of farming at a standstill, life moves indoors. The longhouse, already crowded, now feels claustrophobic. You are trapped in the smoky, gloomy space with your entire extended family, from the newest baby to the most ancient grandparent, plus the livestock. The air is thick, the privacy non-existent. But this enforced confinement is not a time of idleness. Winter is the season for craft and maintenance. You sit on your bench by the fire, the flickering light glinting off the blade of your knife. You spend hours carving a new handle for an axe, a set of game pieces from a piece of bone, or a decorative panel for a sea chest. The women of the household are constantly busy at their looms. The rhythmic thump of the loom weights providing a steady beat to the winter days. They spin thread, weave cloth, and mend the family's worn woolen clothes. This is when the sails for next summer's voyages are painstakingly made. It's also a time for repairing tools, sharpening blades, and treating leather. Every piece of equipment must be in perfect condition for the explosion of work that will come with the spring thaw. Survival depends on this constant, patient industry. To combat the crushing boredom and the darkness, you turn to the great Norse pastime, storytelling. the longhouse becomes a theater. A skilled storyteller, perhaps an old warrior or a traveling scout, will hold the entire household spellbound for hours. They recite the great epic poems and the family sagas from memory. You hear the tales of the gods of Odin's quest for wisdom, Thor's battles with giants, and Loki's clever, malicious tricks. You hear the stories of your own ancestors, their feuds, their voyages, their triumphs, and their tragedies. These stories are not just entertainment. They are your history, your religion, and your moral compass all in one. They reinforce the values of your culture: courage, honor, loyalty to kin, and the pursuit of a lasting reputation. A weird and little-known winter activity might have been sport. The sagas describe a rather brutal game called narrated, a kind of Viking baseball, or lacrosse played with a hard ball and bats. It was often played on the ice of frozen fjords, and the sagas report that these games frequently got out of hand, with serious injuries and even deaths, sometimes sparking new feuds or reigniting old ones. It was a way to burn off the pent-up aggression and energy of a warrior society confined indoors. The high point of the winter is the Festival of Yule. It takes place around the winter solstice, the darkest point of the year. It's a multi-day feast that celebrates the eventual return of the sun. It involves the things Vikings loved best: feasting, drinking, and sacrifice. The best boar would be slaughtered and eaten. Oaths for the coming year would be sworn on its bristles, and vast quantities of ale would be consumed. It's a brief, bright explosion of noise and light in the middle of the long, dark silence. But as the winter drags on into its 4th and 5th months, the mood can become grim. The food stores begin to dwindle. The hay for the animals is running low. The sick and the elderly are most at risk, their bodies weakened by the cold and the lack of fresh food. This is the hunger gap, the most dangerous time of the year. Every strange creak of the house in the wind, every howl of a wolf in the distance, heightens the sense of being besieged by the forces of nature. You can do nothing but wait, huddle closer to the fire, and trust in the work you did during the summer and autumn. Your survival depends not on a single act of heroism, but on months of careful, boring, meticulous preparation. Let's imagine you've been lucky. You survived the raids, the storms at sea, the diseases, the feuds, and the brutal winters. You have navigated the treacherous currents of your society and have managed to reach what, in your time, passes for old age. You are perhaps in your late 40s or early 50s. Your body is a roadmap of a hard life. Your joints ache with what is likely arthritis from years of manual labor and sleeping on hard wooden platforms. Your teeth are worn down, and you have a few missing from abscesses. Your back is bowed, and your face is a leathery mask of wrinkles from a lifetime of exposure to sun, wind, and smoke. What does it mean to be old in the Viking age? There is no concept of retirement. There are no pensions. Your value to the family and the community, which was once based on your physical strength and your ability to produce, must now shift. Your role becomes that of a respected elder, a keeper of wisdom and memory. You are no longer on the front lines of the farm work. You can't swing an axe all day or wrestle with a plow. Instead, you take on the less physically demanding but still vital tasks. You sit by the fire and repair tools. Your gnarled but still skilled hands fixing a broken harness or sharpening a set of knives. You watch over the youngest children, keeping them out of the fire and filling their heads with the stories of the gods and heroes that you now know by heart. You have become the living library of your family's history. Your advice is sought on important matters. Your lifetime of experience is a valuable resource. You know the history of the local land disputes. You remember the details of a marriage alliance made generations ago. You can read the signs of the weather and predict the severity of the coming winter. At the thing, while you may no longer have the loudest voice, people listen when you speak, your words carrying the weight of decades. You are the embodiment of tradition. However, this respected status is conditional. It depends on your family's prosperity and their continued goodwill. In a society that lives on the edge of subsistence, an unproductive member could be seen as a burden. If the family falls on hard times, a bad harvest, a lost feud, the elderly are the most vulnerable. An old Norse legal text, the Gragas, has a chilling provision known as kvilingar, or the belly provider. It stipulated that if a person became unable to support themselves, their children or other relatives were legally obligated to provide for them. This shows that society recognized the need to care for the elderly, but the fact that it had to be legislated also suggests it wasn't always done willingly. The darker side of aging is the fear of becoming helpless. The sagas contain grim stories of elderly people who feel they have become a burden. In one famous saga, a family is starving during a famine. The old matriarch of the family walks out into a blizzard to die, sacrificing herself so that there is one less mouth to feed. While this is likely a dramatization, it reflects a very real anxiety. Your worst fear is not death, but a slow, lingering decline that drains your family's precious resources. This leads to a fascinating and controversial theory among some historians about a practice called a test up a. This is the supposed tradition where elderly people, upon becoming a burden, would commit suicide by leaping from a high cliff in ancestor precipice. This idea became popular in later Swedish history and folklore, but there is almost no credible evidence for it from the Viking Age itself. Most modern historians view it as a myth, a romanticized or misunderstood piece of folklore, rather than an actual historical practice. The reality of dealing with the elderly was likely far more mundane and tragic. A slow decline from sickness or malnutrition in the corner of a smoky longhouse. Your health is a constant concern. The chronic ailments you've accumulated over the years are untreatable. There is no pain relief beyond Dayland willow bark tea. A fall could easily result in a broken hip, which would be a death sentence. You are entirely dependent on the care of your children and grandchildren. If you are a woman, your role as a matriarch can be one of great power. As the HUS Freja, you may have passed the physical keys to the storehouse to your daughter-in-law, but you retain the metaphorical keys of wisdom and experience. You are the expert on herbal remedies, the chief midwife of the community, and the ultimate authority on all domestic matters. Your daughters and granddaughters come to you for advice on everything from weaving techniques to raising children. You watch the seasons turn, a spectator now, rather than a participant in the great struggles. You see your sons and grandsons prepare for their own voyages, and you feel a strange mix of pride and fear. You have earned your rest, but it's a precarious peace. Your survival, your comfort, and your dignity in these final years rest entirely in the hands of the family you have raised. Your greatest achievement is no longer the silver you won or the land you farmed, but the strength and loyalty of the kin you will one day leave behind. Let's rewind the clock. Imagine you haven't been so lucky. You haven't grown old gracefully. Instead, you found yourself on the wrong side of the law, and not in a way that can be settled with a simple fine. You have committed a crime so heinous, so disruptive to the social order, that the thing has declared you an outlaw. This is the worst possible fate that can befall a person in your society, a punishment considered by many to be worse than death. The formal term for this is to be made skage armor, literally a forest man. It means you are banished from the community, cast out from the protection of the law and the warmth of the longhouse. You are to be driven into the wilderness, the forest, to survive on your own. What could you have done to deserve such a fate? Perhaps you refused to pay a WER guild after being found guilty of killing a man. Perhaps you were caught practicing forbidden, malicious magic, or maybe you violated a sacred oath, or ambushed a man in a particularly dishonorable way. These were not just crimes against individuals. They were crimes against the very fabric of society. The sentence is passed at the thing. The law speaker declares you an outlaw. From that moment on, your life is forfeit. You lose all your property, which is confiscated to pay your victims and the chieftain. Your wife can legally divorce you. Your children are no longer your heirs. You cease to exist as a member of society. But the most terrifying part is this: anyone, anywhere, can now kill you without legal consequence. In fact, killing a declared outlaw was often seen as a public service, and sometimes even carried a reward. There is no sanctuary for you. You can't appeal to a neighboring jarl for protection. The sentence is absolute. You are now fair game. Every man's hand is turned against you. You have a short grace period, perhaps a couple of weeks, to flee before the sentence takes full effect. You run. You grab what little you can carry, a knife, a flint for making fire, a small bag of dried food, and you disappear into the vast, unforgiving wilderness of the Scandinavian landscape. You become a ghost, a specter haunting the edges of the world you once belonged to. Your life is now a desperate, moment-to-moment struggle for survival. You sleep in caves, in hollow logs, under rocky overhangs. You hunt small game with snares, fish in remote streams with a makeshift spear, and forage for edible roots and berries. You are constantly cold, constantly hungry, and constantly paranoid. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves could be a man who has recognized you, coming to claim the bounty on your head. You avoid all human contact. You might sneak to the edge of a farmstead at night to steal a chicken or a handful of vegetables from a garden, but the risk of being seen is immense. You are a wolf in sacred places, a pariah, cut off from all human warmth and community. The loneliness is as great a threat as the hunger. One of the interesting historical questions is where these outlaws actually went. While some certainly lived a feral existence in the forests of their homeland, many likely tried to flee the country entirely. Iceland, with its vast, uninhabited interior highlands, became a notorious refuge for outlaws. The sagas are filled with stories of famous outlaws, like Grettir the Strong, who survived for years in the Icelandic wilderness, living in remote, fortified lairs and battling both men and monsters. These tales, while highly romanticized, give us a glimpse into the psychology of the outlaw, a figure of immense strength and cunning, but also one of deep tragedy and isolation. A lesser form of this punishment was hugabsorgar, or lesser outlawry. This was a fixed-term banishment, usually for 3 years. You were exiled from your homeland, but retained your property and rights upon your return, provided you survived. This was a chance at redemption. Full outlawry was a life sentence. A little-known nuance of the outlaw system is that you were not entirely without hope. A powerful friend or kinsman could, in theory, work to have your sentence overturned, perhaps by paying a massive fine or negotiating a new settlement. But this was rare. More likely, your only allies were other outlaws. Sometimes, small, desperate bands of these forest men would form, preying on travelers and remote farms, becoming a genuine menace to the society that had cast them out. You live this way for months, maybe years. Your clothes are rags. Your hair and beard are a wild, matted tangle. You talk to yourself to keep from going mad. You are more animal than man. Your old life, the warmth of the fire, the taste of ale, the laughter of your children, feels like a dream you once had. Your existence has been stripped down to its most basic elements: finding food, finding shelter, and avoiding other humans. This is the ultimate expression of Viking justice. It wasn't about rehabilitation, it was about excision. By declaring you a skagayarmar, society wasn't just punishing you, it was erasing you, surgically removing you from the social body to preserve the health of the whole. And as you huddle in the freezing rain, gnawing on a half-cooked squirrel, you understand the profound terror of being utterly uncompletely alone. Let's step back from the brink of outlawry and return to the mainstream of your life. You've navigated the challenges. You're respected in your community, and your family is secure. But now, a new and powerful force is creeping into your world. A force that will challenge everything you believe about the gods, the afterlife, and the very structure of your society. This is the slow, inexorable arrival of Christianity. It doesn't arrive with a sudden invasion. It trickles in, carried by merchants returning from Christian lands, by missionaries who bravely or foolishly preach in the courts of powerful Jar LS, and by raiders who bring back not just silver, but Christian thralls who pray to a single, powerful God. At first, you and your neighbors are likely curious, and perhaps a little contemptuous. This new religion seems strange. It has only one God, which seems rather insufficient compared to your bustling pantheon of Esser and Veneer. This white Christ, as he is sometimes called, seems weak. He allowed himself to be captured and killed without a fight, a concept utterly alien to your warrior ethos. Where are the stories of him wrestling giants or tricking his enemies? The Christian missionaries who come to your lands are a puzzle. They build small, wooden churches. They have no wives. They speak of sin, redemption, and the final judgment. They condemn your most cherished traditions. They say that leaving unwanted infants out to die a grim but accepted practice in your society for dealing with deformed or illegitimate children is murder. They condemn your practice of taking multiple wives or concubines. They preach forgiveness and turning the other cheek, ideas that seem like madness in a world governed by the blood feud. Yet, this new faith has a certain power that is hard to ignore. The Christian God is presented as universal and all-powerful, the creator of all things. This is a very different scale of divinity from your gods, who, while powerful, were blind, can be tricked, and are even fated to die at Ragnarok. The Christian promise of an eternal paradise for the faithful is also a compelling alternative to the murky, shadowy afterlives you imagine. Whether it's the feasting halls of Valhalla reserved only for warriors slain in battle, or the gloomy realm of hell for everyone else, the conversion of Scandinavia was a long, complex, and often violent process that lasted for centuries. It wasn't a simple case of people seeing the light. The decision to convert was often a deeply political one. A powerful jarl or king might decide to be baptized for pragmatic reasons, adopting the religion of the powerful Christian kingdoms to the south, like the Frankish Empire, was a good way to improve trade relations and be treated as a political equal. A king might see that a single, all-powerful God who anoints kings was a much better model for centralizing his own authority than a messy pantheon of squabbling, independent-minded gods. This creates a fascinating period of religious blending and confusion. For a time, the two faiths exist side by side, sometimes peacefully, sometimes in violent conflict. You might see a man wearing a Thor's hammer amulet right next to a Christian cross on the same chain, hedging his bets. Archaeologists have even found soapstone molds that could cast both a hammer and a cross at the same time. This was a time of spiritual negotiation. People tried to fit the new God into their existing worldview. Christ might be reimagined as a powerful spiritual warrior, a divine chieftain who defeated the demon of death. One of the most debated aspects of this transition is how it affected the common person's worldview. Did they truly understand the complex theology of original sin and the Holy Trinity? Or did they simply add Christ to their existing collection of powerful beings to be appeased? For you, living through this, it's a confusing time. Your jarl has decided to accept baptism and is now ordering his followers to do the same. The local wooden statue of Thor has been torn down and burned, and a wooden cross has been erected in its place. The winter blot has been forbidden. You are now expected to attend the service in the new church. The ritual is alien. There is no feasting, no ale. A priest in a long robe chants in a foreign language Latin and speaks of things you barely understand. You are told that your ancestors, the ones you revere and leave offerings for at their burial mounds, are now burning in hell because they were pagans. This is a deeply unsettling idea that strikes at the very root of your identity. The resistance to this change can be fierce. Pagan traditions go underground, practiced in secret. There are periodic violent uprisings, where a Christian king is overthrown and a pagan jarl is put in his place, only for the process to reverse a generation later. The process of Christianization is a messy, 2 steps forward, 1 step back affair, but the new faith has the backing of powerful kings and the vast institutional and intellectual resources of the European Church. The old ways are doomed. You find yourself caught between 2 worlds. You might still say a quiet prayer to Freyr for your crops, just in case, but you do so in private. The world is changing, and you must change with it, or be left behind. The age of the Vikings, the age of the old gods, is slowly, inevitably, coming to an end, not in a blaze of glory at Ragnarok, but in the quiet chanting of a priest in a small wooden church. Let us assume you have lived a long and full life. navigating the treacherous transitions of your age. You have seen the world change from one of old gods to new, from raiding parties to established kingdoms, but no one, not even the most successful jarl or the most cunning merchant, can out-navigate death. Your time has come. You lie on your platform in the longhouse, or perhaps in a newer, smaller house built in the Christian style, surrounded by your family. Your breathing is shallow. The world is fading. What happens next? What does your final journey look like? The popular image of a Viking funeral is, of course, the magnificent ship burial. The deceased chieftain, dressed in his finest clothes, unsurrounded by his weapons, treasures, and sacrificed animals, is laid upon his long ship. The ship is then either pushed out to sea and set ablaze with flaming arrows, or it is buried on land under a colossal earthen mound. This is the funeral of heroes, the dramatic send-off seen in movies and TV shows. And it did happen. Archaeologists have excavated several spectacular ship burials, like the Osberger and Geocastad ships in Norway. These were the funerals of the super-rich, the one-percenters of the Viking Age. They were an immense display of status and a massive expenditure of resources. The buried ship was not just a vehicle to the afterlife. It was a final, spectacular statement of the deceased's power and the wealth of the family they left behind. But for you, an ordinary Kyle, this is not your fate. A long ship was a hugely valuable piece of equipment, the equivalent of a modern-day fortune. Your family is not going to burn or bury something that valuable. Your funeral will be much more modest, but it will still be deeply rooted in tradition and belief. After your last breath, the women of the family will wash your body and dress you in your best clothes. You won't be dressed in armor, but in the fine woolen tunic and cloak you saved for special occasions. They will comb your hair and beard one last time. It is a final act of care and respect. Your burial will likely be an inhumation burial in the ground or a cremation. The choice between the two varied by region and by time period. In the early Viking Age, cremation was more common. You would be placed on a wooden pyre, along with some of your most important personal possessions. These are your grave goods. For a man, this would typically include your personal weapon, your favorite axe, or spear, your knife, and the tools of your trade, like a blacksmith's hammer or a farmer's sickle. For a woman, it would be the symbols of her role, her keys, her loom weights, her spinning wheel, and her finest jewelry. These items weren't just sentimental tokens. They were what you would need to maintain your status and lifestyle in the afterlife. The belief was that you would continue to exist in a state very similar to your life on Earth. A farmer needed his tools, a weaver her loom. A fascinating, undebated question is whether these goods were killed before being placed in the grave. Archaeologists often find swords that have been bent, spears with their heads broken off, and shields that have been deliberately smashed. Was this to release the object's spirit so it could travel with the deceased? Or was it a more pragmatic act to discourage grave robbers by rendering the items useless? If you were cremated, your burned bones and the remnants of your grave goods would be collected from the ashes and placed in a ceramic pot. This pot would then be buried, often under a small mound of earth or a stone cairn. Sometimes, a rune stone would be raised nearby. These were large stones carved with runic inscriptions, commissioned by your family. They typically read something like, Bjorn and his brothers raised this stone in memory of their father, Thoreyar. He was a good man and a great traveler. These stones were not gravestones in the modern sense. They were public memorials, a way of ensuring your due mister, your reputation, would live on and be remembered by the community. If you were buried, the process was similar but without the pyre. A grave would be dug, and you would be laid inside, often on your side in a fetal position, surrounded by your possessions. Sometimes, a simple wooden coffin was used, and in some cases, you might be buried in a small boat, not a great long ship, but a more modest fishing boat or skiff. This still represented the importance of the vessel in the journey to the afterlife, but on a more affordable scale. What about sacrifice? While a jarl might have his 1,000 horses killed to accompany him, This was not a part of your funeral. However, a feast would certainly be held. After the burial, your family would host a great funeral ale or fire. This was a way of honoring you, celebrating your life, and, crucially, of legally transferring your inheritance to your heir. As your eldest son formally took his seat in your high chair, he became the new head of the family. The feast was both a memorial and a business transaction. If you lived into the later Christian period, your funeral would be starkly different. You would be buried in a consecrated cemetery near the church, without any grave goods. The Christian faith taught that you needed nothing for the journey to heaven but your faith. Your body would be laid out straight, with your head to the west, so you would be facing the east and the rising sun on Judgment Day. It was a simpler, more uniform, and much less personalized farewell. The grand, individualistic statement of the pagan burial was replaced by the humble submission of the Christian soul to God. Your final journey, like your life, would be defined by which world you happened to die in. So, here you are. At the end of our journey, we have dragged you from your smoky berth in a longhouse to the grime and glory of a brutal, vibrant age. You've tasted the blandness of daily porridge, felt the sting of salt spray on an open ship, and heard the whispers of a VOLVA in the firelight. You swung an axe in a chaotic raid, haggled for furs in a bustling market, and felt the deep, gnawing cold of a Greenland winter. You have lived and died as a Norseman. Now, what is left? What is your legacy? For most people, the answer is almost nothing. If you were an ordinary cow, your name is gone, lost to time like a footprint in the mud. You left no diary, no memoir. The stories you told, the songs you sang, the specific memories of your life, they vanished with the last person who remembered you. Your physical remains, whether buried or burned, have long since mingled with the soil of your homeland. You are anonymous. Your legacy is simply the fact that you survived long enough to have children, who had children, and whose descendants may be walking the earth today, completely unaware of their connection to you. You are a single, forgotten link in a vast genetic chain. But some people did manage to leave a more permanent mark. If you were wealthy or important enough, your family might have raised a ruined stone in your memory. These stones, scattered across the Scandinavian landscape, are one of our most direct and personal connections to the Viking Age. They are the closest thing to a voice from the past. A stone in Sweden might proclaim, Anga had the stone raised after Tok, her husband. He was the most honorable of men. Another might hint at a darker story. This stone is raised for my brother, who was betrayed and killed in the south. They speak of travel, of trade, of feuds, of love, and of loss. Each one is a tiny, tantalizing fragment of a life story, a deliberate attempt to cheat oblivion. Your legacy might also be in the land itself, the farm you cleared from the forest, the fences you built, the fields you plowed. The very shape of the landscape might still bear the subtle imprint of your labor, visible only to the trained eye of an archaeologist. Or perhaps your legacy is a place name on a map. Thousands of towns and villages in northern England, in Normandy, in Iceland, still bear names of Norse origin, a linguistic echo of the farmers and chieftains who settled there a millennium ago. A town ending in by like Grimsby or Thorplex Gunthorpe is a ghost of a Viking settlement. And what about your culture's legacy? The world you lived in may have vanished, but its influence is surprisingly persistent. The political structures you were part of, like the Thing Assembly, are seen by some historians as a seed of modern democratic principles. The ships you built and the trade routes you forged helped to reconnect a fractured Europe and linked it to the wider world, paving the way for the globalized economies that would follow. The sheer audacity of your people's expansion pushed the boundaries of the known world. There's also the curious legacy in language. If you are listening to this in English, you are using a language that was profoundly shaped by the Norse. Words like sky, skin, lake, window, husband, the, trust, get, give, and even the pronouns they, them, and they are all direct borrowings from Old Norse. They are so common, so fundamental, that we don't even notice them. Your linguistic DNA is embedded in the very structure of modern English. The academic debate over the Viking legacy is a fierce one. Were they primarily destructive pirates who brought terror into chaos, as the early monastic chroniclers claimed, or were they primarily constructive traders, explorers, and settlers who built cities, established new trade networks, and created complex legal systems? The answer, of course, is that they were both. They were not a monolith. The man who burned a monastery in Ireland and the merchant who peacefully traded for silk in Constantinople could have been the same person, or they could have been brothers. Your world was one of contradictions, a place of brutal violence and sophisticated artistry, of pragmatic commerce and deep spirituality, of claustrophobic communities and breathtaking voyages. So as you lie in your grave, whether pagan or Christian, your personal story is over, but the ripples of your life and the collective life of your people continue to spread outwards through time. You are the ancestor, the ghost in the machine of the modern world. You are the silent, forgotten farmer whose hard-won survival made everything that came after possible. Your time is over. The fire in the longhouse has gone out, but the faint smell of wood smoke still lingers in the air. And so, your journey through that cold, harsh, and vibrant age comes to a close. The echoes of the accent, the ore begin to fade, replaced by the soft hum of the world around you now. The sharp edges of that reality, the biting wind, the smoky air, the constant, nagging hunger all begin to soften and blur. Like a watercolor painting left out in a gentle rain, the faces of the Jarl, the VOLVA, and your fellow shipmates recede into the mist of memory, becoming less like figures you have met and more like characters from a half-forgotten dream. You can feel the rough wool of your tunic giving way to the familiar comfort of your own bed. The hard wooden platform beneath you melts away, replaced by the softness you know so well. The sounds of the longhouse, the crackling fire, the snores of your kin, the lowing of cattle are all drifting away now, down a long, quiet river, leaving only the gentle, rhythmic sounds of your own breathing in their place. You are no longer on a ship tossed by the North Atlantic, but are now adrift on a much calmer, deeper sea, a sea of quiet and approaching sleep. Let the current take you. Let the gentle waves of drowsiness rock you slowly, carrying you away from the past and into the peaceful, silent stillness of the deep night. The story is over. Your own quiet is all that remains.